Welcome to the Executive Innovation Show podcast, where we bring you real executive conversations with industry game changers and thought leaders. We ask the questions you're thinking, what you're scared to ask, and we make your brain hurt afterward. With your host, Carrie Chitsey, co-founder and CEO of One Touch Video Chat, live video interviews, and the nonprofit Humans Helping Humans.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's show on the Executive Innovation Podcast. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking about innovation in acquiring new customers in community banking, a big question we get all the time, brought to you by One Touch Video Banking and One Touch Video Chat. Got two great guests with us today. First on the show, we've got Brett Wyss, who's the president and CEO of Integrity Bank and Trust. Brett joined Integrity in 2004 as a loan officer and was promoted to CEO in 2017. His banking passions are really around advocacy work for the Colorado Banking Association, as well as FinTech and multiple delivery channels to customers. Then we have Josh Pape, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Banking Officer at Citizens Bank of Edmond in Oklahoma, named the most innovative community bank in the country in 2019. By the Independent Banker. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So as we kick off the show and talking about innovative ways to find and acquire customers in community banking, I want to read some stats from a recent white paper that we published, Banking Beyond Four Walls, where we pulled in some data for some different sources, and I want to get your guys' opinions on this, that regional and community banks have 50% of the physical branches in the U.S., but only 20% of the deposit growth. And the big five banks have 24% of the physical branches, but 50% of new deposit openings. So we can look at this in two ways. One is that the physical branch presence isn't as critical as it used to be, or that community banks have a lot of opportunity to really build deep relationships in their local markets and gain market share. So I want to get how you guys interpret these numbers and what your thoughts are as a community banking executive. Brett, we'll start with you first. What are your thoughts when you hear those numbers?
Yeah, certainly I think on first glance, I look at those numbers and there's a little bit of alarm, but as you consider them and think through what could possibly be happening, community banks are targeting a specific demographic community. We're not going nationwide. And so my strategy is very targeted to where I live and what I'm trying to do in my community. And so I see a ton of opportunity for people here locally that want a little bit more customer service, products that are tailored directly to them, flexibility. And so, one of the things I often tell people is those big banks that tend to be taking a lot of market share or seem to be, they're often my best referral source. And what I see is if I can deliver multiple channels to customers that can get in touch with me, then there's tremendous opportunity because I have them beat when it comes to service and flexibility and those kinds of things. So I see a lot of opportunity in that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what about you, Josh?
Yeah, I can see both aspects of it. Clearly the branch isn't as critical just from a functional standpoint as it used to be. People aren't having to go by the bank on Friday afternoons to deposit their paycheck anymore if they don't want to. So something as simple as that kind of proves that's the case. However, what community banks have, having physical locations, they do have the opportunity to gain market share because their resources are targeted in those communities. So a national bank with 6,000 branches wouldn't have the resources to deploy in a concentrated effort into a small community that a regional or community bank might have that's just located in that community. So I think there's still a ton of opportunity to gain back market share. As Brett said, we often get referrals from bigger banks as well. And I think there's just something special about community banks being in those communities, having resources that they have dedicated towards that community that they're centered in. So I do think at our bank, we have proven that engagement with the community can return market share back to you.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point as, executives are really kind of and marketing teams are really having to get creative and kind of think outside of the box as, mailings and print and, all the physical branch, a lot of those things that community banks used to thrive on. The digital game has kind of changed some things. So as we look at, you guys are both doing kind of innovative things outside of the box in your particular markets. Josh, at Citizens, you guys are doing some really cool things. Can you give us 2 examples of things that you guys have done in the past that's really kind of been outside the box to acquire or, build relationships with potential prospective customers that has been good for you guys?
Yeah, I'll speak to a couple of those quickly. One of the biggest things that we do is what's called Herd on Herd, and that's actually a street festival that we host on the 3rd Saturday of every month, March through October. We just in this past season, we've been doing it 6 years now, had our 1 millionth attendee at that event over 6 years. Has a huge economic impact to the local community, family-friendly event. Music, local restaurants, local craft beer breweries get to showcase their business. So there has been a large return on that. Now, that's not why we did it, but there's been a large return on customer influx because they love serving the community in that way. And then also, we actually have a Vault 405, which is a co-working space and small business incubator here at the bank. In bank property that's owned. And that's really a membership that our small business customers can add on to their relationship for a fee based upon how much space they occupy to work in. We drive value adds into that program to give not only a place for people to launch their business or grow their business, what other value can we give them in addition to that? And so both of those things are 2 really big things. We have some patented technology as well in a unbanked facility, which is an electronic facility that allows full service banking on a 24-hour basis to small business owners. Doesn't require bank staff. So a bar owner at midnight can come in and exchange cash or paper bills for rolled coin as a change order. It doesn't require any of our bank staff to be there. So those types of things have helped us create value where there wasn't anyone creating value before and has driven customers to the bank.
That's awesome. And at Integrity, Brett, what are you guys doing? What's kind of working for you outside of the box?
Yeah, very similar strategies, I think, and you'd probably find that in community banks all over. I'll give an example. We do a lot of events within our branches for the community. We do an annual shred event where we invite the community to come in, and it's not just bank customers, it's everybody. Bring your shred documents, your old tax returns, things that you need to get rid of, and get our shred company to come on site, and we'll barbecue and set up. Every year we invite Santa to come during Christmas. This year he brought a reindeer with him. And so, it's more than just an email saying, hey, we're here. It's inviting the community into our space, whether they're a customer or not. And so, we get a lot of traction with those types of events, and we do them quite frequently. And another thing is I call it more of a mindset, a mentality shift, where our sales staff, our loan officers, our business bankers, our wealth managers, our mortgage bankers are all trained more along lines of relationship and building those relationships and adding value. And I'll give you an example. I've got one construction lender who is very successful. And part of her strategy is to be a resident expert for all of the builders that bank with her. She knows permits and what's being pulled and activity and cost per square foot and labor shortages. And she's just familiar with all that stuff and makes a point to know those. So her customers use her as a resource. And it's more than just coming and getting a loan. Yep. It's being very intentional about how do I add additional value beyond a transaction, because if I play the transaction game with the big banks, I lose that game. And so there's more to it than that. So those are really 2 targeted strategies that have been successful for us.
And I think those are all great examples, because I've always said, the big banks can't do that, right? They can't go throw a festival in every small town. Maybe they could have a shred event, but they're not going to be barbecuing. I mean, They're
Right.
not going to, do those things. And so, as we look at, 2020 is the year of buying on customer experience over price. And so I think we'll get out of a lot of the price and rate games, and people aren't going to care on, 0.1 versus 0.02 or whatever. They're going to know that Bill down the road is going to take their phone call, or they have his cell phone number. They're not going to have to call in and, to a big IVR and talk to a different person every time. Josh, I want to dive in a little bit on this co-working space model because, talking to so many bank executives, it's the first time I've ever heard of it. And I think it's just really cool. And so you guys, had this kind of real estate that you needed to do something with. And so you created this kind of co-working. Walk me through a little bit of, what's it like? How is it? Obviously, you went into it from a real estate game, and, maybe that would pay off some of those, kind of startup or entrepreneurs would be good banking customers or bigger banking customers. So walk me through a little bit, because I'm sure a lot of banking executives are like, what, a co-working space by a bank? Like, how does that work? So walk us through a little bit of that journey.
Yeah, so it's a lot about the summary is what you said. The bank years ago consolidated its branches from six branches within a 2-mile radius of where I'm sitting today, full service branches that are really a cost center, weren't profitable, consolidated down to one primary branch. But we still have real estate here in the downtown Edmond within a block of our main location, or our only full service branch location with staff. And so we had all this office space, and we had just an abundance of real estate that was really a cost center. It was costing the bank. It wasn't earning anything back. So Jill Castilla, our president and CEO, had the idea of how do we turn this into an earning asset, but also not just to make money, but create value, deliver return to our customers, return to the bank through more customers. So like all good innovative things, it came out of a reaction to a need. It was a response to something that was needed. And so what it looks like is it's a membership to your bank account. So you have to, first and foremost, you have to be a Citizens Bank of Edmond customer.
Okay.
And then you have the option to add on a monthly basis, a membership to your bank account to Vault 405. And as an example, I'm sitting in Vault 405 in a podcast studio that's state of the art. So that's an example of one of the amenities it has. And so based upon your level of membership, you can occupy undedicated space where you're free to come down and occupy wherever is open. And we have some dedicated spaces that's more flexible. You can have a dedicated desk where this is your desk, not necessarily office or closed door, but this is yours to come in every day. It's assigned to you. And then we have dedicated office space where you can work. And again, that's all based upon which membership you select. We offer 10-day passes. But in addition to that, again, that's just in a nutshell, that's co-working, but it's also an office complex. So how do we take it beyond that? So what kind of programming can we drive in for our Vault 405 community members? What kind of value add back can we give besides just a place to work? But what types of things can we educate them on? As an example, our Vault 405 property sits in a federal opportunity zone. And so everybody who works out of Vault 405 has a business address in a federal opportunity zone. So is there or is there not opportunity for those business owners through that to access capital, whether it be becoming bankable if you're a startup, grant funds, economic development type grant funds, or is it how do we help you raise capital from an outside perspective or educate you on how to raise some capital from an outside perspective? So again, it's all just a membership add-on of your relationship with the bank. And then we just try to facilitate community. Last night, we had a little wine and cheese mixer for our community members to get to know one another. And we have seen them kind of cross-pollinate, share ideas, and then collaborate on new ventures together. And so that's really how a response to a need has turned into something really, really special and unique for us.
And I'm guessing too that, the kind of theme of this podcast of acquiring and kind of finding new customers is the creativity and the thinking outside of the box is not leading with be a customer, be a customer, be a customer. It's let's build a relationship. Whether it's coming to a shredding event, whether it's co-working, even though they may be, already a customer, they're in there, they're going to run into a bank employees. It's going to be more front of mind of, hey, I need a line of credit. Oh, cool. We're all in the same space. Let me just walk over there. versus, oh crap, I got to fight traffic. I don't feel like talking to the bank today, all that kind of stuff. So do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of jump in. I totally agree with that. You have to be able to articulate what value they're going to get from being a customer of the bank. And we throw that word around. Value is this intangible pie in the sky thing oftentimes. So it's really uncovering what does that tangibly look like for the customer. So you alluded to not being as rate sensitive, and maybe the war over 5 basis points on a loan or deposit isn't as pertinent. It's still there. I think you just have to be willing to explain what value I can tangibly give back to you. Yeah. Although I can't compete in that rate, but I'm in a podcast studio and you could be too. And what does that do? What return does that give for your business from a consumer standpoint, the experience in the branch? So I don't need to come to the branch, but why do you want to come to our branch?
Right.
And so I agree with that. And so I think just telling people you need to be a customer isn't enough. You have to really innovate value return for your customers.
Cool. And Brett, I know that Gartner released a study that said 80% of financial firms in the next 12 years due to FinTech are going to be non-existent. And I know that you've made a pretty big bet and really big believer in FinTech and bringing kind of tech and innovation with that interaction to your customers. Tell me a little bit about where you see FinTech and how community banks should be thinking about it as complementary versus threatening, and your kind of philosophy around that.
Well, when FinTech became a big buzzword several years ago, the industry was up in arms about they're going to take our customers, they're going to take our deposits, they're going to do this. And I think there could possibly be some truth to that. But I see FinTech and banks in two separate lanes, right? So you look at a FinTech company and what are they trying to do? They're trying to innovate. That's like their big thing is innovate, innovate, innovate. And regulation destroys innovation. And if they were to move into the banking lane, all of a sudden they'd be straddled with these regulations that we have figured out that would be difficult for them. Well, a bank on the opposite side is not necessarily an innovator when it comes to technology. I mean, I think there are some trying to lead, but we're just so restricted with regulation and difficulty and cultures in banks that say, hey, that's how we've always done it. Why do we need to change? Those are all headwinds that our industry fights when it comes to innovation. But we have data and we have FDIC insurance that is absolutely invaluable, especially to a FinTech company. And so we each have something that the other wants and needs. And I just see an opportunity where we can sit down and say, hey, how do I take what I have and you take what you have and we all benefit from it, and namely our customers benefit from it. And so that's really what I've tried to do. I'm working with a company called FiCrowd right now, and I have permission to disclose this. They're a company that it's like a crowdfunding platform that sits next to the bank's platform, where my customers are going to be able to do crowdfunding within the bank software and the bank app. And those funds, instead of going to a FinTech company, are now going to sit at the bank. But I can go to my nonprofits and say, hey, the next time you run a campaign, instead of having a lunch and doing the cards and everybody filling out a pledge, and then you walk away and someone doesn't mail the card back or whatever, why don't we do a crowdfunding campaign right there? You get the money because people do it with their cell phone, and the bank benefits and they benefit. And so it's those types of opportunities I'm looking at. We've talked and gone down the road with other FinTech companies on personal finance software and other things. And it's just a niche that I think is going to be important as the expectation of financial services in the marketplace grows, as customers are just accustomed to doing more with each of their apps and those kinds of things. And so we need to be looking for these partners to be right along with what they're seeing out there.
No, that's great. And the last thing I want to talk about, kind of still playing a little bit on the technology, but having that human interaction, is, the customers change, right? We live in this digital first world. first world. We're mobile banking more than we ever had. We're only going into the branch 1 to 3 times a year. We've got all this stuff outside of financial services at our fingertips. And, you have to now appeal to that digital customer. Josh, you mentioned, the employee-less branch where, it's open 24/7. A lot of banks, the hours just don't work for customers anymore. And as we look at not only acquiring customers, but servicing customers, a lot of the branch layouts are changing, going to pods, going to video banking, video ITMs, having all kinds of different things. So if we were to listen to this podcast in, 3 or 5 years from now, I'd like to get your guys' take on, where is it headed, of taking down those physical walls and really extending that acquisition and servicing to the customers, and still having that human, interaction. Josh, where do you see it headed in the future?
I'd like to think that we're trying to figure out where that's heading today. And so I can speak a little bit about what it looks like today for us. And I think it'll evolve, but just as a starting point, we have a very open environment at Citizens. Nobody has an office, including myself or the CEO of the bank. So it really starts with transparency, openness, which fosters collaboration and working together. And so not only amongst our employees, but how do we have our customers, when they come in, feel that same collaboration on the bank? So again, going back to, you don't have to come in, but why do you want to come in? So we have a community space in our bank that has free Wi-Fi. We have a state-of-the-art coffee machine that can be driven by an app or even possibly through mobile banking software. We do have ITMs. We're actually about to, here in our main branch, open that up for 24-hour access. So again, trying to create value to customers who don't fit the traditional banking hours like you spoke to. There's a lot of people, and there's an article, I can't remember where, I just recently read about how banks are not hitting the mark. Yeah. And so I think thinking about those things that are, most people aren't focusing on cash-intensive businesses, but we came up with a solution that does. Most people aren't focusing on the factory worker that has to work all day and can only buy a house at night. We're trying to think through that. So I think catering to some of those needs that are still out there and not just dismissing the people that still want that access, but I think you also have to nail the consumer access. I'm not going to argue that people want more online, mobile, convenient access. So you kind of have to be both and I think there's room for that. So how do you make the bank, like it used to be, a place you want to go to and a knowledge center and a resource? Because online banking is a resource, a deposit account is a resource, debit card features is a resource, but all those things don't add up to personal or small business success. You still have to have knowledge and content. And I think we can deliver that as community banks better than the big banks. And so I think for community banking specifically, I can't speak about bigger banks, but that's where it needs to be. And I hope it is in 5 years that the community banks just innovate. What does community banking look like? So I guess that's my answer. I hope that's
great. And Brett, where's the future for you?
Yeah. And, I still believe in the branch. The proof is in the pudding in that I've got my 4th branch under construction right now. The concept's totally different, much smaller, more boutique-y. The barrier between customer and employee is minimal. You go to a normal branch and you've got a big desk and the glass and all that. That's totally gone, and it feels very intimate, up close. And so, I look at individuals now, and there's a number of channels that people like to communicate through. And my goal is to open up all of those channels. And so people that enjoy coming in can come in. People that want to do something via text can do it via text or email or video or whatever other channel might be. Some people love it when the bankers go to them. And so we have a very mobile sales force. It's, we empower our bankers to go do what they need to do to serve our customers. And so my strategy has been to offer all channels available. And, I think very similar to what we just heard, make my branch a place people want to be, and also be flexible with my real estate and how can we evolve and change it as times change. I've got older real estate that's got the check stand in the middle, and we're already gearing up plans to get rid of those check stands and But now we're going to have a bunch of square footage that's open, and I think I got some pretty neat ideas today of what could possibly happen with that square footage. So.
Well, cool. Well, the last thing we always ask on the podcast is, what is one thing as a bank executive that's keeping you up at night related to banking, not spouses, kids, all the things that really keep us up at night? So we'll go back to you, Brett. What's one thing that's keeping you up at night?
Well, fortunately, I'm a pretty good sleeper, but I see where the question's going. For me right now, I really don't like the political unrest and the uncertainty out there that we see in the political realm. You talk to any business owner, banks included, we like certainty. We'd much rather deal with a difficult situation that is known than the unknown. And I think there's enough of that unknown out there, whether you think economy, politics, litigation. These are all things in our society that are just out there and kind of big unknowns right now.
And Josh, you?
Well, I have a 1.5 and a 3.5-year-old, so I was just going to give you their names, but since it's banking related, then I'll speak to that. I think for me, we're a 55-employee bank. We're $300 million roughly. How do we scale to be a 55-employee bank at $3 billion if we get to that point one day, if that's what the market gives us? But so how do we be scalable, and how can we remain scalable to go find our blue ocean? I recently read the Blue Ocean Strategy. And so what is our blue ocean? How do we differentiate our value proposition and using a scalable team that looks like what it does today, defining our value curve and value proposition? I think deciding how to do that is what keeps me up at night.
Well, awesome. Well, it has been such a pleasure to have you both on the show. Feel free, if you have any questions for either of today's guests, to submit those questions and we'll get you the answers. Click on the show notes to follow either of these guys and the great work that they're doing at both the banks. As always, feel free to subscribe to the show, leave us topics for a future podcast, and get your podcast delivered to you every Tuesday. Josh, Brett, thanks so much for being on the show. You guys were great and had such great knowledge on the topic today.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks.
This podcast has come to a close. To hear more from the Executive Innovation Show podcast, subscribe, submit questions, and share the love. Follow us on social. We're everywhere.